All right, everybody, we are back with another episode of Wealth for the Culture. And today, this is going to be an interesting topic. We always talk about generational wealth on this podcast, talk about business. I have Nike Anani. She is first of all, she's an author. She does public speaking. She's a top 100 consultant globally in family enterprises and stuff like that. And what she basically is coming on, she's going to discuss. We talk about generational passing things on, after we're gone, and leaving a legacy behind. So her alley, this is her expertise. She works in business. So I'm gonna just, I've talked enough. How you doing, Nike?
I am excellent. Thank you for having me, Ollie.
So how I normally start off these shows is I just kind of want to get a bit of your background, just introduce yourself to people that may not know who you are.
I am Nike Anani. I'm currently based in Lagos, Nigeria. In 2 weeks, I'm relocating to Austin, Texas permanently.
Really?
So interesting fact. I am a second generation business owner. So my father started off our businesses the year I was born, actually. So I'm the first of three siblings. And I am also, as well as an owner, I also consult with other businesses that are seeking to build legacy enterprises. I help bridge the gap between the two generations. Typically, there's distinct differences in opinions, preferences, perspectives between the founding generation and the next generation. And that can hinder a lot of the succession planning process. So I come in to bridge that gap so we can build a enterprise in a nutshell. How did I get here? So in a nutshell, my inside journey as a business owner really inspired a lot of the work I do today. I went to university in London and I worked in Deloitte in corporate tax for a few years. But I found it quite hollow and I wasn't really inspired. I found it extremely boring, to be perfectly honest with you. And decided to take some time out to really figure out what I wanted from my life. And at this point, my dad was still in Nigeria, so he never left. He was building the business out. Like I said, he started the business the year I was born. By this point, it really evolved. And so I thought, let me just take off a few months. Let me go home, really understand what he does, meet a few of his friends. Maybe I'll be inspired and I'll go to do business school and figure out my life from there on. That was 10 years ago. I never left Nigeria. As soon as I got here, I loved it. The entrepreneurial culture, there was just so much. It was so energetic. There was just so much going on that it lit me up in a way that London didn't. And so I started working alongside him in our family businesses, which are in construction, in real estate, and in engineering. I found it, whilst I loved it, right? I loved the informality. I loved the fact that it was so purposeful to me. Working in the business meant that I was providing financial security for my family. It also, I could make the connection between the work that I was doing and providing financial freedom also for employees and leaving a legacy in communities, right? Whilst it was all very positive in that regard, it was also very difficult. Coming in, settling into the business, finding my own leadership voice, working a business that was very founder-centric. My dad had lots of control. I felt like I didn't have a voice. So in some ways, it felt like a regression from corporate, but in other ways, it felt like a huge acceleration from corporate because I had so much responsibility as well. And I found that there was no one to help me navigate all these many transitions. Like, how do we start having conversations on, Dad, when you pass away, what's happening with this whole business? Like, who's going to take over? Like, estate planning, all those really awkward conversations in a culture where we don't talk about death as Africans. Young people are not supposed to, challenge older folks. You're supposed to wait for your turn, right? So I just found it really difficult and really wanted someone to help me navigate that. But there was no one out here in Nigeria that had the skill set. So I ended up training with Family Firm Institute in Boston and became an advisor to help my family navigate and start succession planning. so that we could build the building blocks to make sure that it would outlive my dad and outlive me and my children as well. And so I started serving families. So that's how I got into this. It wasn't opportunistic, just looking at the market, oh, there's an opportunity here, but it was very much inspired by my personal journey.
Well, you got a lot going on in that 10-year span. First off, congrats on moving to Austin. I'm actually in Dallas. So
oh, wow.
So nice. It's crazy because you were mentioning, you hit a lot of things that I have like a lot of questions about, especially when you start talking about, because I'm starting business and stuff. So I hear you mentioned, challenging elders or trying to find your place and your voice. And it's kind of crazy because I think about that, like when I'm going, you don't want, if you have a family business, that's something you can pass on. You don't want it to just disappear when you disappear. You want to have some type of checks and balances in place. So that's like a smooth transition. So this is going to be a dope conversation because I've actually like a couple months ago brought on a estate planning attorney. So now I got more questions. But I definitely want to say, congrats to you on that. That's crazy that you just left Nigeria like that, just never came back. And I was gonna ask you why you left tax world, like the corporate world, because I'm stuck in it right now, and I'm like doing this and entrepreneurship. So it's crazy that just talk about. But like, what is like? I guess you kind of hit on a little bit. Like, I kind of like to ask my guests, like, what's your why? Like, what keeps you going? Like, what is your why in all of this?
Great question. Simply in 2 words, and poverty. Growing up as a Nigerian, I seen a lot of poverty all my life. And unfortunately, right now, Nigeria is the world's poverty capital. We have 88 million people living on less than $1 a day. Poverty robs you of your pocket, but it robs you of your mind. It robs you of your time. It robs you of your dignity. And I've seen firsthand how entrepreneurship is literally an antidote to poverty. Entrepreneurs build businesses, ideally achieve financial freedom for themselves and their families, but also through their economic activity, they're providing sustainable income for a whole value chain, like your employees and things. Entrepreneurs make an impact not only on, again, not just their finance, their personal checks, but they make huge impacts on communities. They tend to be very purposeful in the way they, in the activities they do in their local communities. And I guess when I moved back to Nigeria and I observed the extent of poverty, I also observed the extent of entrepreneurial activity. Lots going on, really on fire, new startups all over the place. But I couldn't see many businesses that would survive more than a generation. And I started doing research on this and discovered that only 2% of Nigerian businesses would outlive their founders. And I thought, wow, this is really, this poverty, we've got this antidote that is entrepreneurship. We could build a system through which we are intentional about cultivating generational businesses so we can have generational wealth and, quite frankly, end poverty. Like I said, it robs you of your pocket, it robs you of your mind, it robs you of your time, it robs you of your dignity. And I believe that there are many rooms that we're not let into because we don't, wealth, unfortunately, is the reality of our world. It opens doors. It opens doors, but unfortunately in our world, it has a color. And it's unfair that we don't get to be in those doors where we get first dibs on the greatest opportunities, or we get a voice in how we want to shape the world we want to see, because we are beneficiaries of this world and we deserve to be part of the conversation. So that's really it, is empowerment, empowering folks through wealth.
Well, first off, that was very moving and powerful. And I just want to say, you mentioned entrepreneurship is the antidote to poverty. Mm-hmm. And that lot of stuff, because, especially nowadays, right, we see a lot of everybody's preaching the whole go be an entrepreneur, but nobody thinks about the fact that the entrepreneurship is, that's a especially for like, Black people and stuff like that, that's like definitely a pathway to build wealth. we don't also think about how it generally affects everybody around us as well. And just the fact that it'll provide opportunity for others. Because you were mentioning, like, out in Nigeria that they live on, most 80% live on $1 a day. And, I think, and that's crazy, honestly, when you say it out loud, because, we take a lot of stuff for granted here, like over in the US. And it's just like being able to be an entrepreneur and provide opportunities for other people. Because I have a mantra on this podcast. I always say, what good is success if everybody around you is still struggling? So,
100.
that's just, it stuck with me because, that's just like the basics to me of, why people should do entrepreneurship. Because again, I always explain to people as well, like, entrepreneurship may not be for everybody. It might not be for you, but that doesn't mean, you can't build wealth some type of way. So, just the fact that you're, not only helping carry on legacies for people, but also creating opportunity for others is very powerful. So, also I saw it was like African family firm. Is that what it's called? Can you kind of break down what that is?
Similar to you, I believe in communities. And so when I started my journey, trained up as an advisor to help folks with building generational businesses, I realized that to make an impact on this space, it wasn't enough to do for-profit consulting. Folks needed each other in community. So African Family Firms is a non-profit community of business owners across the African continent and in the diaspora. We believe at AFF that social capital is almost just as important as financial capital. Social capital, providing a platform through which people can learn from each other, network with one another, provide business opportunities for each other. That synergy where 1 + 1 = 5, right? That's the mantra and the heart behind AFF. So we have a chapter network across the continent, like I said, and growing into diaspora, particularly with my move to the States, really excited about that. It's also a platform to educate. So we bring on many experts come in and talk about building wealth, building generational businesses, philanthropy, social change, entrepreneurship, anything that speaks to legacy wealth, legacy enterprises, we educate our members on. And we do lots of research as well in conjunction with learning institutions on the continent to understand why is it that we're not seeing as much generational wealth as we could see. And then lastly, we do advocacy. So AFF is like a nonprofit. It's like my philanthropic work. I'm a co-founder of that with a great friend of mine, Sissy Mutendi. And yeah, we're really passionate about not just the conversation on wealth is usually limited to what do you need to start, financial capital or intellectual capital, the knowledge you need to have, but there's very little conversation on the importance of cultivating networks. And when we talk about networks and networking, I'm not talking about going to a conference with 1,000 people and some gala and seeing all these amazing ambassadors or on some stage. Those have a lot of fanfare but little impact as an entrepreneur. I'm talking about small trust circles, groups of 10 people, 8 people you meet on a monthly basis and you go deep with. You're able to share your triumphs, you're able to share your trials, you're able to help support one another, you're able to really, you move from being just a stranger to being a family member, right? And you help your family. You're intentional about spotting opportunities for your family. You're intentional about sharing knowledge with your family. That's what AFF is all about.
And I'm glad you hit on the networking aspect, because a lot of people, myself included, until recently, I took that for granted. And so now I try to be very intentional about trying to get out there and just meet people and I think I'm glad you mentioned the becoming like a family aspect, because a lot of people, I think, especially in this time, it's more of when they try to connect with somebody, is what can you do for me? And instead of just like me personally, I just kind of go into if something comes out of it, great, and I mean, that's fine. But it's kind of like, how can I provide value to you and you as well in turn can provide value to me? So it's like you're pouring into each other, A lot of people, they'll come with that just to hand out, and they can't it's just like, what, take. And at some point you have to be able to, and I explain this to a lot of people, especially like younger people, just like, it can't always be like, what can you do for me? Teach me this, do this for me. Because most times, more often than not, you're talking to people that are already doing it. or may be successful in what they're doing or whatever. So it's kind of like, what's my incentive, you know? And I don't mean to sound that way, but that's what it ends up being. It's like, well, what benefit do I have trying to help you? Instead, you can just go be genuine to that human being. And I mean, don't get me wrong, they can become a mentor to you. It could just be somebody that's in your network or anything. You know, y'all can go co-found something, y'all can go partner up and do business. And outside of just the business realm, like you just mentioned, you built a community environment, and that's how you build a tribe, you know, and that's how you start making a real impact in the world. So I mean, that's definitely like something I'm glad that like everything you're hitting on, it just resonates with me, especially, you know, this is kind of what we talk about on this podcast often, and it's just kind of the basis of everything out here, because it's one thing, you know, to get wealth and all that. Like I said, you want to bring people with you, but it's also about being able to pass that and help somebody else out. You know, each one, you know, reach one, teach one, you know, stuff like that. And so I'm just glad you hit on these things and letting it be understood that that's something that's very important, because a lot of people don't think about that type of stuff. They just think about, you know, oh, success, and they just think that it's equated to, you know, oh, I got a lot of money, or I got, you know, just this. And that's a little bit deeper than that. And that's what I try to tell people, like, it's the money's just the tool to be able to do all the other things that you want to get accomplished. So, you know, shout out to you. I'm glad you hit on that. But I'll just get back on track, because what you do, you know, helping move business on within the legacy and keep it going. I have a question for you. And so, like, you know, you deal with the older generation, because, you know, we're you know, our parents or whoever started, you know, people older than us built this business up. So, like, okay, let's say they pass away, or even if you're transitioning while they're still alive, what you say are like steps you would take kind of to get out of their shadow. Kind of, you know, you said you mentioned, so I mean, you've kind of gone through this, like kind of creating your own way, your own path, and kind of building up a rapport with the people that's already in the business.
Yeah. No, that's a really good question. It's difficult to come into an established system where you are seen as an extension of a big personality, and you literally feel like you're in their shadow, right? But it takes a lot of inner self-leadership to get to a point where you start to have conviction, courage, to own who you are and to be present in that. So for me, it's about firstly developing deep conviction for yourself. So that means understanding you as Nikia, you as Ollie. What is your purpose? What are your strengths? How does that fit into the family business? You know, Miles Monroe used to say, where purpose is not known, abuse is inevitable. So if you don't know your personal purpose, there's going to be abuse, right? And your personal purpose might not mimic or look like that of your father's or your mother's, right? It requires you looking within and understanding your strengths, your passions, your dreams, your hopes, and then mapping out an appropriate, an appropriate way to achieve that. Another thing is to be curious. So instead of being intimidated in these situations where you feel like you're in the shadow of someone else, that mentality and that emotion stops you from learning. It stops you from observing. It stops you from getting better. Instead, it's important to have a learner's mindset, a learner that has an open mind, where you're able to learn, unlearn, and relearn, where you're able to observe situations without judgment. So I often give this analogy that we want to be like journalists that are asking questions and we don't know what the answers will be. We're not intimidated, or impressed by what answers to come. We're just, okay, tell me more. And you're open-minded towards wherever that may lead to, as opposed to being like a teacher that has the answers before, as you're marking the script. It's important to have that learner's mindset. So you're able to also appreciate and learn from the older generation that might be creating this huge anxiety for you, because chances are there's a lot to learn from them and impart from them. We need the resiliency of the old as well as the innovation of the new. We need both. We really do need both. There's a lot to learn from them. And I would say courage. It's not enough to just build this conviction and have this curiosity, but not being able to move with who you are, or move with that innovative mindset. You have to actually take action. You actually have to take that vision you've got in your mind's eye and bring it to life in physical reality. You have to, where appropriate, you have to challenge assumptions and perspectives and try new things, right? So those are what I would say. It's really about self-leadership. It's all about inner work.
And I think the biggest thing that you just hit on and all of that is taking action, because it's not enough to know that you're capable and it's just talking that, but you have to be about it and display that, or else nobody's going to take you serious. And you mentioned, I don't know how you worded it, but it was good. I think you were saying it turns. Oh man, I don't know how you worded it. If you don't take it, it turns into abuse. God damn.
Yeah, where purpose is inevitable. It was Miles Monroe that used to say that before he died. Where purpose is inevitable. So where purpose is not known, abuse is inevitable.
Yeah, and that to me was like, man, that's a bar. and I was just like, golly. And I mean, at the core of it all, it's truly all about taking action. And I learned that every day, because a lot of times, and this ties back into, your network, who being able to figure out, not just following into what, your parents are good at or what they were known for within this business that you're taking over, but being able to find your own thing that makes you different. Everybody has their own thing about them that makes them them. And once you figure that out and you start acting on that and taking action, it's very powerful. So I'm glad, you dropping gems. So I'm about to just try to get all my questions out right now while I'm thinking about them. No, we talked about, what things you can do to kind of step out of the shadow of people. So like, can you just kind of break on, just like, since you work with so many businesses, can you kind of say like, what are just some common things you see that people like do mistake wise, or like where they mess up at going and they're trying to take over, I guess being a next gen like business, taking that over?
One I often see is trying to mimic as opposed to trying to reflect and be who you are. We were not born to be imitators. We were not born to be version 2 of someone else. We were born to be version whatever of ourselves. So it's about understanding that you are on your own personal evolution in life, where you're striving towards endless mastery, right? So that's one. Another one that I see is when they try to take over is try to shake things up a bit with almost a presupposed solution in their mind as to what needs changing, without spending enough time noticing, observing, and learning about the environment. You might see things quite differently from the outside from when you're actually on the ground taking over from a business. The reality, you might suppose that you've got the best solution, but that might not actually be the reality, right? So it's important to have that learner's mindset, to seek to understand a system before then you're understood. So to seek to study the founder, if you've got the gift that they're still alive. If you haven't, seek to understand the other employees, the stakeholders, the customers. What are they seeing, feeling, thinking? Develop an empathy map, right? To get into their worlds, because we all see life very differently. The lens through which we see life becomes our reality. I heard it said quite differently recently I was listening to a podcast and Will Smith was talking, and he was talking about how being an actor is like an invaluable skill in life, because when he's an actor, He has to ground all his assumptions. He has to suspend all his judgment, and he has to take on someone else's persona to be able to embody that character effectively on stage. And I think we as leaders have to do the same. We have to learn to be able to see, hear, understand the way other people do, so that we're then able to influence them effectively. It is when people feel seen and heard, that's when they see and hear. They don't want to feel nagged at. They don't want to feel preached at. They don't want to feel questioned. So your role is to be a facilitator. Your role is to be a guide. Your role isn't to impose, but your role is to foster an environment where you're able to get folks around you to submit their ideas, and you all co-create the best ideas.
And that truly goes back to what you were mentioning. It ties in though, just building a family culture, just building a community. And I understand, like, people understand, people come in and people come and go in life, but to be able to have, like, that's what you just like described is truly like a valuable skill that like takes people it takes people forever to figure out how to do that, because they're so busy trying to be like somebody else they've seen, instead of just kind of, making what works for them work. But also, you mentioned empathy, and I've been in like management for forever, like well, not forever, like going on like I'm 28, so like 5 years or so. But it's just like that's something that's so key, because when you have a team of people, when you're initially coming in, they don't know who you are. They might have been there before you. So now it's kind of like, okay, how do I drive change? How do I, how do I get their respect you? Because that's something that people don't understand is key. And for me, I've always done it a certain way. Like, I just want to be like, hey, I can say I do the same thing you do. I'll do it with you. And, what ideas do you have? Because at the end of the day, if you make, like we're talking, like, we're entrepreneurs, yes, but again, not everybody wants to do that. Some people are okay with just going to work, doing what they want to do, and they just want to feel like part of something. So, I mean, when you get these suggestion people and you take into account what they even think, it's just little things like that make a big difference to people. So I'm glad you were mentioning that as well, because I've been on the like not in charge side, and I that's how I learned what I feel like things should be like, as I get into the roles of taking over and be it in charge, stuff like that. So it's like, be able to pour back into people and understand where they're coming from. And you said hear them out, because if they don't feel seen or heard, they're not going to, it's just a die. At that point, the culture is just dying there, and it's slowly going to end. So I'm just glad that you hit on that. So I really want to ask you real quick, because you're an author. Can you talk about this book you have? What is it? Building Resilient Family Enterprises?
Yeah. So when I started my career as a family business consultant, like I said to you, I'd moved back to Nigeria 10 years ago and observed a lot of businesses that I'd failed to pass on to successfully to the next generation. And I'd attended a lot of knowledge sharing events on family businesses around the world. But I found that they didn't necessarily speak to the African situation. So this book, Building Resilient Family Enterprises, was literally a 5-step framework to help folks that have built their businesses to know how to ensure that these businesses will outlast them. So in it, we speak to the importance of a business foundation. So if you want to ensure that you're building a high-rise building, you have to ensure that the foundation is sturdy and of good quality, right? So foundation in a business is really people. HR, ensuring that you have the right culture. You have HR is strategic as opposed to being administrative. You've also got good finance acumen and good finance culture as well. Standard operating procedures. An organization that goes beyond the founder, an organization that's able to run like a well-oiled machine that's not dependent on the founder to run. Secondly is governance. Typically, we talk a lot about corporate governance, but in a family setting, you also have to think about family governance. The family needs governing as well. There needs to be a process through which we're able to make decisions, we're able to reflect on policies, we're able to mediate conflict and what have you. Then we need to think about succession planning of the business, of like estate planning as well, and of leadership. Then we need to think about diversification. So in an African context, because our economies are quite volatile, our political environment's quite volatile, this is particularly important. You don't want your wealth to be all tied up in this illiquid business, right? You want to be systematically putting money into real estate or to the stock market, into assets that have little correlation in terms of asset type, currency, geography, industry with your underlying operating business. And then the last step is innovation. How can we improve on what we've built? How can we do things faster, cheaper, better? And that can mean process, product, service, and what have you. So that's what that book is about. But actually, that book was available for free on my website, but I took it down because at the moment I'm actually writing another one. I've developed my thinking a lot more since then. And this book is really about how can we ensure transformation in family enterprises, particularly with COVID and everything, we've had this huge wave of disruption. How can we ensure that we're building future-proofed enterprises that will withstand the test of time, that would have a legacy of transformation, so they're able to be agile, adaptable, but will also leave a transformational legacy. So will also leave an impact in communities, will also precipitate social change, and what have you. So yeah, in about 3-4 months, that should be done.
Okay, so basically you're giving the blueprint.
Something like that.
The blueprint to pass it, building a business and passing it on. And that's huge because people need that type of stuff. People don't, we live in as a thing of you don't know what you don't know. Mm-hmm. So that's why I'm just such a big advocate. I tell people all the time, like, go read a book, go listen to a podcast, just get information, because right now it's so easily accessible compared to 20, 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like I could just go on the internet and just be like, boom, I got this. Like my mom and stuff, she couldn't do that. And so I'm just glad, I get to talk to people like you that have this information, because I get to learn, my audience gets to learn. And sometimes it's just things you don't even know that you didn't know, or you were like, oh, you might not even been aware. It's like I've come across people like, oh, I'm starting this business, but I'm just like, and I'll ask them like, so what's good? Like, what's the plan after, like, you're gonna pass to your kids? What? They're just like, well, no, I don't know what I'm gonna do with it. But it's just like, you gotta have a plan. And so that's what I think is important. Like, it's one thing to get success, but it's another to be able to transfer it over to the people that you want to have it, first off, like getting to your family, because normally that's what we're doing it for, is to build generational wealth. So we're worried about, our kids and their kids and so forth. So you don't want to have something where you start a business, then somebody else comes in and takes over it after you die, and now your kids are stuck with nothing. And if they are, fortunate enough to be able to figure something out on their own, that's fine. But they could have had this already, and made something else on their own. So it's just good. I feel like I would say that's like the blueprint you give it out right there. So I definitely, I'm gonna check that out when it comes out. Just let me know so I could check it out.
I definitely
let everybody know.
But thank you.
It's been a dope conversation, because I'm glad I like doing this because I get to talk to people who think similar to me, and it's hard to find people like that. Yeah. So I'm just glad, and this is something like I didn't even know like people really like do businesses like this. It's just something that's different. Like I say, you could do something with anything. And the fact that you're out here trying to teach and lead people to be able to, pass on generational wealth. And literally that's like the whole reason I made this podcast, is just to build wealth, and not only build it, but, once you get it, how do you keep it? So I just want to thank you, Nike, for coming on. I appreciate you. And I also do this last segment though, before you can just bear with me. Just a talk to the culture segment. So I'll run off a few questions, and you can just answer them best you can. So first question is, what does wealth look like to you?
Wealth is health. Wealth is people. Wealth is security. Yeah. So wealth for me is not just money in the bank. Wealth is freedom. Honestly, yeah, wealth is freedom. That's what wealth looks like to me.
Mm-hmm. And so next question, I always get a book recommendation. I know you coming out with your book also, but just a book you read in the past. It doesn't have to necessarily be business related. Just something that, you know, you got something from.
Start with Why by Simon Sinek. That was a mind shift for me. The importance of the why, the importance of understanding purpose, a higher calling, and not just focusing on the what.
And next thing, I always ask everybody, you know, what is one piece of advice that you would give somebody?
Start with the end in mind. So we have a saying in Africa saying, if you want to know the end, look at the beginning. So if you're building a business today and you want to build a legacy business, don't do it. Don't start thinking about it when you want to retire. Start with the end in mind. Start putting in the work today. Start sowing those seeds today to make sure that you will see that tree bud at the time you need it to bud. Start with the end in mind.
And that really just goes back to just take some action, you know. So, and what I want to know is, well, you mentioned that you were coming to the United States and Austin.
Yeah.
What is next for you? That's what I want to know.
You know what? I'm so excited about the move. I'm so excited that it's a time when the US is opening up. So I'm going to be doing lots of speaking, lots of training, lots of workshops, which I'm really excited about, helping folk build generational wealth. I'm also excited about the expansion of African family firms into the US. We'll be growing our community in the States. I'm also excited about just this new beginning, this new renewed sense of possibility, of opportunity, and new connection.
I mean, Austin definitely a dope place. Texas never really closed for COVID.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a nice experience for you. I can definitely tell you that. Yeah. But also, do me a favor, though. For everybody out there listening, I'll also put this in show notes, but how can people find you? You know, social media, websites, all that. How can people find you?
You can find me on my website. That's the easiest place, www.nikeanani.com, NikeAnani.com. My links for social are on there. My email address is there. My podcast is on there. But simply, I'm on social. Everything is at Nike Anani, so it's quite simple. Just Facebook, Instagram, we'll have that in the show Twitter. Notes. Yeah.
Oh, you keep it simple. You ain't got to figure out nothing else. I appreciate you, Nike, for coming on. I thank you because I learned quite a bit, and especially being somebody that's an entrepreneur, you know, wants to pass these things on when I have kids, stuff like that. That this is definitely like a nice, like, just people don't think about this. People don't think about these little things like this of like what happens after. It's just like, especially in our community, you know, Black community and all that. It's just like, well, we don't talk. Nobody talks about death. It's not. It's a touchy subject. Nobody wants to cover, but it's also one of the most needed conversations because you need to have a plan for what happens when you're gone. So I just want anybody listening to this, you know, just take heed of that because what she really just dropped everything that y'all kind of need to know. And she's writing a book in case y'all just want to have something physical, you know, to have access to. So just take heed to that, man. And like we always say, what good is success for everyone around just still struggle, man. Each one reach one, each one teach one. If you got any value from this podcast, I know I did. And hey, that's all, you know, just go like, comment, subscribe, rate 5 stars, go follow Nike. I'll have all her information in the show notes. And I appreciate you all. Thank you.